Hi everyone, wherever and whenever you are joining us from. Welcome to another Fireside Chat. I am here with Mudita, who is the Senior Director of Product at PayPal. Mudita, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Great to be here.
So we were chatting a little bit backstage, and I think we're going to have a really amazing chat. We've got so much to talk about already. You're all very unlucky that you missed the backstage chat because it was fascinating. But let's get started with learning a bit more about your personal story. Can you tell us how you got to where you are today and how you got started in tech?
Absolutely, yes. So it's been a little bit of a windy journey for me. I was one of those, I guess, people who didn't really know what I wanted to do when I grew up and was excited about all things tech. I started my journey as a developer and realized that I wasn't a very, very good developer, but loved all aspects of creating and developing, a problem out. I subsequently became a management consultant after doing a stint in development and working with some really brilliant engineers and enjoyed that quite a bit. Back when I started my management consulting career, there used to be this concept of implementing large enterprise level software. And that was the first foray, I would say, into product management, where you really learn how to gather requirements, understand and listen to your customer, do a lot of deep thinking and writing and developing that type of good behavior. And then working with a cross-functional team, with your clients as well as yourself in order to implement a product. So that was where I started understanding that I enjoy the aspect of deep solutioning, understanding a problem in depth, talking to people, working with different minds to come towards a solution together. But also realized that my heart was aching for some fulfilling, meaningful work, not like my consulting practice work wasn't meaningful, but I really loved the idea of the private sector and the public sector joining hands and building solutions that could really scale. So I know one of the things that deeply sort of thrilled me is, hey, you take a problem, but if you're able to implement it at scale, the opportunity to service many people is really exciting and really fulfilling. And I think the public sector gives you that aspect, and the fuel that private sector innovation provides can be just a phenomenal experience. I had a great opportunity to then work with the county of Los Angeles, worked in the DC area quite a bit as well, worked in Fresno County, worked in Honolulu, Hawaii. So I was very blessed in traveling to different parts of the country and really servicing our government sector quite a bit. But then took a break because I needed more time to think about what life would be next. Went back to school for my grad school education, and actually got trained as an epidemiologist and a biostatistician and in public policy. So very different from what the work I actually do. So it could be, I guess the biggest learning is you can find many ways into product is what I think I'm getting at. And then ultimately, did a lot of work as a program manager for the Gates Foundation, also worked at the World Bank projects, or for the World Bank projects quite a bit, and really understood the importance of financial technologies and how they can empower people at the grassroots level. And PayPal really sits in the middle of this problem and trying to solve this problem. But there are many other, excellent companies and thought leaders thinking about the same kind of problem as well. So that's how I found my road through many types of trainings into the product role, and enjoyed greatly because I'm able to take a little bit from all of those experiences and now work towards building a product that can be scalable, can be something that is delightful, something that really makes an impact on the lives of people. And that's how my product journey has been.
That's such a varied background. I mean, I've heard a lot of things in people's backgrounds when they come to product. Like, as you say, all winding paths eventually lead to product somehow. But I've not heard epidemiology. That's a new one for us, definitely. Such a unique experience. So now that you're a senior director of product, it's always difficult to sort of describe yourself as your job title in products, because, they mean different things across different companies. Even within the same company, two different directors of product can be doing very different things. What does your kind of day-to-day or week-to-week look like at that level?
It's a good question. Actually, I would say that one thing that we learned during our consulting days. I think that way of thinking about product potentially still holds true. And I'll share that, and let's see if the audience resonates with this. So we think about a problem space in three ways. One is people, one is process, one is tech. And that's an oversimplification, obviously, of the problem. But as a director, or even as a product manager, I would say, you're always trying to move these three levers when you're working. You're thinking about the people that you work with, whether they are your team or extended team. You're thinking about the processes to unblock them and to simplify execution of product, building the product, bringing it to market. And then the third piece is obviously innovative technological solutions. I think the rigor and the discipline, the focused behaviors are things that we need to champion in order to make a product. And a lot of my time is spent really thinking about how do I introduce, good behaviors in our team, and really celebrate the excellent success that naturally comes when you hire brilliant minds and just unlock their potential. So my job as a number one thing that I do is to really step out of the way and not get in the way of my team and really accelerate them. And then also, as I am getting out of the way, understanding from them through a continuous communication, where are the friction points that they see in their own day-to-day execution. So a lot of time is really spent on the people management aspects of my job, and really nourishing and taking care of my team, and then our extended team by default. And then, of course, figuring out the processes we need to put in place in order to make sure product delivery is a well-oiled machine. And there's always an opportunity to do better and better and better. And especially when you work for companies that are a little bit more mature or have done things a certain way, how do you then challenge the status quo without fracturing the system and still accelerating the team? So I think about that a lot. I think a lot of my time goes in strategic planning, strategic initiatives to obviously, bring the business along, and really then making sure that we are aligned to the strategic priorities and not doing work that doesn't make sense for the overall growth of the team or the company. And then obviously measuring our growth and our contribution to business is the third angle that I think about and work on constantly. So a little bit nebulous, happy to go deeper into any of these areas if you'd like.
Mm-hmm. And obviously at PayPal, you're in the fintech industry. Are there any kind of unique challenges to being in the fintech industry that you might not see in other spaces?
Absolutely. I think you are in a very unique position as PayPal, or we are in a very unique position, I should say, as PayPal, because people trust you with their financial well-being in many ways. So regulation, adhering to sort of the compliance framework is the number one, commitment, obviously, to business. And then just taking care of your customers, whether they're merchants or they're consumers. And PayPal is very blessed in that we have a multiple-sided network. So on one side, we have our merchants, over 300 million. We have consumers on the other hand who log into PayPal to transact. And then, of course, the third area that I'm extremely passionate about and my team leads is the developer segment. Essentially, how do you take developers who use the APIs and SDKs that PayPal builds and really sort of puts together payment solutions, beyond payment solutions even, for our merchants to go ahead and accelerate sort of, the online presence or their e-commerce offerings. So I think of it as a three-sided network for us that we are constantly responsible for, but it is rooted in the idea that financial empowerment is extremely important for folks, regardless of their strata or socioeconomic condition, but especially for the vulnerable populations, and doing right by them is something that is a huge mission for PayPal. And often we talk about democratizing financial services. So always thinking about how do we reduce the friction for people who are consuming these services and how we can do better as a company each day in order to service our base, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can just hear the passion in your voice as you're talking about it. It's obvious this is something, like, it's a problem that you're obviously very obsessed with, which is obviously a great thing for product people. So this is something we touched on before we went live about being a woman in tech, a woman in product. And I'd like to ask you a bit about being a woman in fintech, because this might be completely wrong, but the outsider perspective of fintech is that it can be a little bit of a boys' club. Is that a giant misconception, or is there like a nugget of truth in that you've had to kind of maneuver?
Here's how I'll say it. I will keep all company brands aside and just look at the problem in itself in its entirety. Just Silicon Valley, or just the tech space in general, has to obviously do better when it comes to being more inclusive and a place that is more inviting for women in general, or any underrepresented group in particular. And there are various ways of looking at that problem. It starts honestly very early in the way our education system is set up, right? And the incentives we put in place. There are trends that we are seeing obviously changing. If you look at the number of women graduating from colleges with advanced degrees, et cetera, it's rising quite a bit. And that's like, very, very interesting and exciting for me as a person in tech. And the second thing is, I will be honest, women need men as allies in this conversation. And anytime that allyship breaks, then we are almost working against each other rather than towards a common goal, which is that everybody deserves to have a great working environment where they feel respected, they feel like they have a seat at the table, they have a voice in the system, and can really, truly bring about change. So the way I see that, it is certainly not a gender, friction issue. It's just how do we build those allyship models and bring each other along. What my team does in particular, and strategies that have worked well, is really be mindful about inclusion and diversity from the get-go. Anytime we make a hire into the team, we have an opportunity to put the best foot forward as being an inviting workplace, as a place where both women and men have a seat at the table. But we are specifically talking to women about things that they need. So oftentimes, I'll just give an example. Women with young children may not be at the liberty to travel as much for work. We're in a different COVID space, but imagine a world where travel comes back, let's say, or business travel comes back. We have to be mindful of that, right? And can we put policies in place where young fathers and mothers potentially don't have to travel? And can you call that out in your job description to make it a little bit more inviting for women? The other thing we did, for example, within my team, is really look for gendered words in our job description. So for example, women don't often respond well to job descriptions that say, hey, you got to be a go-getter. You got to be like, a complete shapeshifter. You should be able to transform the company. That's too much to take on for any human being, by the way. It's just bizarre that we should even put those types of aggressive requirements in a job description. The way we perform well in our jobs is if we're collaborative, if we communicate well, if we're able to bring each other along. And those are words that resonate with men. They resonate with women as well. And so how do we neutralize some of that gendered entry, even with just a job description? And then, of course, setting up hiring panels that are diverse, not just men, but women, people from different types of backgrounds, etc. So there's careful thought that goes into hiring within my team itself. And then just, of course, oftentimes making sure that when we're hiring women, they see women leaders and are able to see that, we're putting money where the mouth is, money where the mouth, you know how that saying goes?
Yeah, that one.
And just making sure that, we are being authentic in the way we're showing up. And I'm very fortunate here at PayPal and many other companies that I've worked for, where these conversations are not frowned upon. These are conversations that people embrace. Oftentimes, we can lead with examples of good behavior and make that a structural change within the team, so that it's not something that you have to talk about. Like inclusion is in hiring is not something I have to talk about, because that's how I've structured the hiring process. And it's just a process we follow. So that's what I've learned. And then, of course, many other aspects of being a woman in tech and fintech. The spaces for women to own and to lead. And I'm excited about what the future prospect brings us. I'll tell you, there are a couple of companies that I'm extremely excited about in the fintech space And I'll just name one. And I am not an investor in this company. I have no like personal interest, but it's just the way this company showed up was quite exciting. Elevest is an interesting company, I think, that is women owned and thinks about the way women invest and speaks to women. There is an immense opportunity also in the market, just generally, if we're going to be serious about bringing women along, is to invest in products and ideas that make sense for women. And I would say keep Elevest on one side, keep Robinhood on one side. And it's interesting to just see how they both show up. And I think it is a fantastic space for everybody to win, but maybe how you shape your messaging and product for the audience, leaders have to think about, and it all depends on the leader on the seat at that point.
Absolutely. So I'm dying to dig more into both women in the industry and the fintech industry. So you mentioned about the democratization of financial services. How do you see that sort of developing maybe over the next 3, 4, 5 years? Because obviously I think finance is becoming more and more of a hot topic in the public space. Before, money was just a thing like you have your credit card or your debit card, or you have like your wallet, and that was pretty much all we really thought about. But now like investments getting the spotlight, cryptocurrencies getting the spotlight, NFTs, which I still struggle to understand. It's all sort of going on at the moment, and it's a really hot topic. So as a professional in the space, I would love to ask you what you think we'll see from the fintech industry in the next like 5 years in terms of democratizing these services.
I'll take a slightly different stab and maybe a more nuanced response to this than probably you hear from a lot of the product folks in fintech. See, my career in fintech started with my work at UCSF, at the Gates Foundation, with the World Bank Initiative. So my perspective on fintech is very different from what the 1%ers or the 5%ers of the world thinks, and that is also important. But the real financial empowerment or the fintech technology needs to really reach at the bottom of the pyramid. And this is like a poor way of describing it, but the pyramid, let's say, if it's like that, if I can make my hand work, we are kind of solving for this top portion of the world, right? But the problem and the inclusion for financial services needs to happen at the bottom of the pyramid to really transform and accelerate the innovation. Crypto has huge sort of potential for sure. So does these non-traditional ways of financing. So I'm very excited about some of the work that non-traditional banking ideas are bringing into sort of the into the space. Imagine a world where you needed to have collateral. You needed to have a good credit score. You needed to have your parents who could vouch for you, for your credit, etc. Majority of the world may not work like that. People may not have a perfect credit score or a mechanism even to get into the credit market. So what are the alternative systems that we can build in order to enable these people, right? Buy now, pay later is a classic example of how we shifted already in the market. That you don't need a huge, let's say, credit worthiness in order to buy something that could be an aspirational buy for you. You can split it up in multiple sort of payments, etc. So the innovation is happening already, even without us sort of trying sometimes. I think COVID did a lot of that. But I really do envision and hope for a world, as you asked, Ellen, is where we can solve for that bottom of the pyramid customer. If a woman in India is able to, and that's something I'm personally passionate about, is able to go in, use a savings product and build for the future of her daughter, for her education, for her wedding, for her healthcare, that's a win. And that's the end game, honestly. I don't think we'll be able to get there in 5 years. It may not happen in my lifetime, but that's where the ball needs to be, or the eye needs to be. But then definitely all the trends that I'm seeing are very, very exciting. Crypto, especially as you said, NFTs. Yeah, I'm interested to see how that's going to show up. I think I'm a little bit old school sometimes, where I'm like, oh, how does this apply for scale? But ultimately, if the core financial services cannot operate for people who need it most, then we keep solving for that top 5%, and that's exciting. But there's a bigger opportunity out there for sure.
Absolutely. And I think it really speaks to the need for diversity across the tech industry, but also in fintech, that you have people who can maybe more closely empathize with the people at like the bottom of the pyramid, people from like the countries where that type of customer is more common. So yeah, it's just a big white flag waved for diversity in the industry there. So I see we have some audience comments coming in. Lots of people very excited about getting into the fintech industry or transitioning to a product role within the fintech industry. Do you have any like little nuggets of advice or wisdom for people who maybe they already work in product but not in fintech and they're looking to transition, or people that are coming to this straight out of college and thinking, yeah, fintech is where it's at?
Yeah, I'm so delighted that fintech is suddenly, garnering a lot of interest, and universe willing. It kind of stays like that for a long time till we've solved all of world's financial problems. I would say that if you are of a curious mind, you are excited about how finance generally works, and you are not offended by the idea of democratization of money, this is your space. You should be excited about all the tech improvements and acceleration that's happening here. COVID, again, I'll say, was a huge accelerator for the e-commerce space anyways, and payments powers obviously a lot of the e-commerce technologies as well. I would say that if you're interested in fintech, apply because fintech, as far as the core payments pieces are concerned, it is a massive space. And if you can touch components of it, even I, like now having worked in this space for quite some time, I still feel like I'm just scratching the surface, because the technology is just so deep and so wide that I think it'll take lifetimes just to really truly understand all aspects of it. But I think, understanding how the whole credit processing works, how the debit processing works, understanding how money movement works, etc. And this is like publicly available information that we can just go ahead and digest. I think Visa puts out great learning materials. PayPal puts out great learning materials. I think a lot of the new sort of fintech players put out like amazing, just free knowledge out there that I think we should just be eating up and reading on a regular basis. But then honestly, just jump in. There is no magic formula to this. Make your way into the industry. I know that a lot of hiring is happening in this area. It's a great time to actually join as well. Luckily, like the job market is good for the techies at the moment, or product folks at the moment. And I would say that it's not just product. Even if you can touch the program aspects, even if you can touch the analytics aspects of this work, it is actually great learning and sets you up for success. As far as honestly, the qualifications you need, as long as you have basic understanding about finances in general, as long as you're curious about customer problems, as long as you understand that solving for friction is the biggest value add here, I think you're gunning for the right kind of role in fintech.
You're almost making me want to transition into fintech now. That was so convincing. I hope my manager's not listening to that. It was not true. It was a joke. It was a joke. So we've covered some really important topics here. We talked about some really important stuff. So let's, we got another 5 minutes. Let's maybe transition into some more lighthearted things. If you could go back in time and give yourself any piece of advice to the younger version of you for your career, what would that piece of advice be?
I feel like I shouldn't give any advice because I'm learning so much myself. I think this is an advice for myself that I have been using on a daily basis. I think just compassion for yourself. And I am, there is a spiritual angle to this as well. And I'm reading the questions that are coming in from the audience as well. Things are changing so fast in the whole digitization of the economy that is taking place right now, is that we literally have to hang on and just write this right. It's a fantastic time to be in, actually. There is the fear of missing out, of course, but that's where compassion for self comes in. I remember back in the day when I was working at eBay, the CEO had said that you're always training for the marathon. You are not training for the sprint. Of course, it's great to sprint, take a breather, recharge, and come back, but you're training for the marathon. And I think if we take time as a more longer term flow, then it's easier to deal with personal failures or personal, times where I feel like, oh my goodness, I don't think I'll be able to survive this like shocker into my life. But I think having compassion for that is key. And then just writing down your achievements on a yearly basis. This is something that I worked with the chief architect at eBay when reporting into him. He said a great practice he did is at the end of every year, he pulled up LinkedIn and wrote down all the great things that he had done. And it's fascinating because you're writing a little bit of your history and proudly showing it to the world. But it's such a great way to just look back how far along you came. And it's almost a deliberate exercise. Otherwise, we're just running in this hamster wheel without realizing that, we're making a contribution to our own learning. We are sort of making a contribution to the tech space, and documenting that is sort of the great way.
I love the analogy of the marathon because sometimes it can feel like a sprint and a relay race at the same time. So yeah, picturing it as a marathon, that's super valuable. And now as a leader, of course, the more, I know we hate the word authority in product, but the more authority that you gain as you advance in your career, the more things you're able to delegate and get off of your plate and onto other people's, so you can focus on the bigger picture. But is there anything that you kind of like to keep for yourself just because you enjoy it?
Yeah, I before I became a people manager, I also spent a number of years just doing individual contributor or IC work, as it's called in the industry a lot of times. And I love doing the deep writing, the structured thinking. I used to have my own blog at some point as well. And now that you're calling me, you're kind of putting limelight on this. I'm a little bit embarrassed. I haven't kept up with that. So I need to. So I think deep thinking and writing is something that I truly enjoy, and contributing to sort of the strategy pieces is something I enjoy greatly. It's nourishing for my soul. And then some things that I have sort of put in practice and feel very proud of is the hiring framework and the hiring practices that I've built for my team. And I cling on to those things like a little spider who just can't give up on their spider web. And I'm so glad that I'm still involved in some of those things, even though I don't need to be, but truly enjoy sort of the strategic writing, thinking, as well as the hiring pieces of my job, and won't give it up.
Just keep spider clinging onto it. Like they'll pry it from your cold dead hands.
Right. Pretty
well. Mudita, this has been an absolute joy. Please come back for another fireside chat as soon as possible. I can just tell that we've got loads more to talk about. And yeah, thank you so much for generously donating your time. I hope the audience enjoyed that as much as I did.
What fun. Thank you so much for your time, and the questions were excellent, and hope to come back soon.
Okay, that's it for today's fireside chat, unfortunately. But don't worry, you know that we always come back with another one. So we'll see you in the next fireside chat. Bye.